Hey guys, what's up? Today I have something special for you. I had a talk with Wall. This is the lead developer from Project Everlook, and I gathered pretty much a lot of questions you guys had. I pretty much skimmed through the Discord, asked on the forums, and asked some other people if they have some questions. And I pretty much rephrased them, made them shorter, so the interview Q&A flows a little bit better. I also went with the flow. If Wall would explain certain things, I would tackle other questions first. So you will see the questions I gathered in the background. They are not in order though. And there will be timestamps, of course. You can basically pick and choose what you want to see, what questions you want to see answered. Yeah, and I hope you will enjoy it. Do the YouTube things for me, please. This always helps. Also helps the project. You know, more people see it. Potentially more people will play. Pretty good thing, I think, for the community in general. Yeah, and with that said, I will vanish now. Enjoy the rest of the video. Take care. Bye-bye. Yeah, hey guys, what's up? Today I have a little chat with Wall. And Wall, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to speak with Vincent once more. I know it's been quite some time since we've done any Q&As or interview footage, so we just wanted to bring some community updates and give some basic information about the server before it launches. The launch will take place on the 11th, and we have the stress test opening up a few days beforehand, so definitely stop by at least the 9th and try and get your names registered and reserved.
And I would say I would just read some questions to you then. What type of server will Everlook be? Expansion, and if it's progressive or not?
The Everlook project is a Blizz-like 1.12 vanilla server. It's a continuation of the Lights Hope and Northdale servers. It has many of the same staff members. Some new faces, some old. But we're trying to bring players essentially the same experience that they enjoyed on Northdale. So it's going to be vanilla, and it's going to be progressive 1.2 through 1.12 all the way through. Progressive itemizations, quests unlocks, but we've taken a lot of time as developers to ensure essentially the best vanilla gameplay, and a few extra things have been added that were lost from previous patches within vanilla World of Warcraft that were removed later on. The players really haven't experienced before, so we believe it's going to be a very fun and exciting time.
There will only be one server then, and most likely PvP then.
Correct. It's just going to be one server, and it's going to be RP PvP. So it's a PvP server. We use the RP PvP tag because there's going to be a lot of world PvP. We want to keep it rather thematic, within the game there.
I had some talk about the rested experience cap will be lifted. What's up with that? Will this happen or?
Yeah, this was a design decision that was in the works for a while. Finally got around to implementing, testing, and refining it just to make sure that everything's working right. We had to take some time to go through it, but basically, currently our plan is to allow players to have no limit on the amount of rested experience that they can gain on their alts, and that's simply because a big concern that a lot of players have with vanilla isn't really the 1 to 60 grind, it's doing it several times months down the road or even a year down the road. A lot of people will quit after getting their full pre-bis and running out of content to do, and we believe that this gives them a very organic way to continue playing the server without increasing EHP rates or any experience rates in general. Essentially, you can't benefit from it unless you're taking the time to have an account logged out for quite an amount of time. And to get from 1 to 60 with full rested takes 400 days. So it's more so a contingency plan that will keep players playing for further on into the server's progression on more accounts. We're still refining it to make sure that there is no potential for abuse. And the plan that we have right now is probably going to be typical normal 1.5 times your current level XP rates for rested. Obviously, the XP gain that you get doesn't change. It's just twice the amount of experience while you're rested. But normally it's capped at 1.5 your current level. So with no cap, it'll allow you to extend past that. But what we're likely going to do is only allow the uncapped rested experience on accounts which have a level 60 character on it already. That's to mostly ensure that people aren't just creating tons and tons of accounts on launch and then letting them sit there for a year. And then especially account sellers and boosters and stuff like that. Like if you have 60 already on the account, it's much easier to monitor for abuse, essentially.
That sounds really good. I saw some people that had really concerns about that, so I think they will be happy to hear that.
Yeah, and I thank Bully Molly for that suggestion. We were kind of debating it because although we do like the idea, and I think that the overwhelming majority of players do like the idea, there is obviously some concerns that it can be abused. And that's often the reason why stuff isn't, back end quality of life stuff isn't really done in vanilla projects, is because people min max the game. And if there's any way that it changes the game for abuse, it's a problem. So keeping a cap to people who already have a level 60, and once you hit 60, your experience rates become uncapped on all your alts. It allows players to just continue having fun in the game without, feeling the monotony of the 1 to 60 grind multiple times.
Yeah, that is getting bothersome then, but that is a really nice solution. What client can we use? Are there other languages allowed?
Yeah, you can use any official 1.12 client. There's several languages. In fact, let me pull up a list of what we have active. All right, so we have the usual, the English 1.12. We have the German 1.12, Spanish, French, Korean, Chinese, Taiwanese. And we also have the Brazilian, which would be Portuguese, client, which the 1.12 Brazilian client is technically custom. It's repack with Portuguese locales translations. That also works, though. The 1.12.2 Spanish client and the 1.12.3 Chinese client also work. We've tested them against our anti-cheat, and we've tuned it to allow those clients to connect. They are vanilla clients, but vanilla continued having a few additional patches for those regions. And right now, people are able to connect with the 1.14, but again, our warden will be adjusted in the future, and that likely will not happen. So don't count on that. And if there is an auto ban from the warden, it'll be a 24-hour ban that won't be lifted. So, you've been advised not to use the 1.14 client, even though it technically does work.
That's good to know. Also, so many clients, damn.
A lot of people think it's, very copy paste cookie cutter, but if the client can understand the server and the server can understand the client, then there's no issue. And there's about 12 different clients in total that can connect, 10 of them being official vanilla clients, and one of them being different localizations for languages that were never developed for the game. I believe the same case is with the Russian client as well. You can connect with the Russian client, but you have to jump through a few hoops in terms of changing your executable name, and there's some guides to it if you want to use the Russian client. But if you can speak English and understand the English client, I would suggest using the 1.12 English client. It's the one that I use, and I know everything works on it. So
I saw a lot of questions about if modifying your game client is allowed.
No, Warden is enabled. It will reject modified game clients, and if you attempt to connect to the server with a client that's been modified, you'll be auto banned. And again, this is modifications. I'm not talking about any of the official clients. If you try and change textures or anything like that, the warden will detect it. You'll receive an auto ban for 24 hours. We review it to see what was changed within the client, and if you're removing walls or trying to cheat, you'll be permanently banned. If you're trying to change the skin of your night elf female hunter to something a little saucier, well, you're still going to be 24-hour banned, so don't do it.
All right. Where's the server located, and what provider do you guys use?
Server is located in France, so you're going to have generally good ping in Europe and extending out where. Personally, I'm East Coast US, and I have about 110 stable ping, which is even better than most servers in the past just because infrastructure and hardware has improved over time. So I'm very excited for low latency myself, but yeah, it's anything up to 150 feels totally unchanged from having 0 almost. A big thing is this is an international server, so there's people from all over the world, and something I've personally noticed is the people from China are experiencing a lot less stuttering and lag. They don't jump around on the screen. The latency just seems better for everyone, and it's made the experience a lot better.
Wow, this is amazing, especially for Chinese people then, because this was another question, but you answered it basically. There won't be a geolock then.
Correct. There's no geolocking. This is an international server. It's a public server, open to everybody. Anybody can play, so We have a lot of people from South America, from Southeast Asia, from just all over the world. It's actually really astounding.
Another concern some people had, can actually Blizzard shut down your server?
Yeah, I mean, there's many legal steps they can take to harass us, but the thing is, the server is located outside of their jurisdiction. It's not really worth their time, and we don't profit from the server. It would be different if we were a project that was making a lot of money, like some of the other ones that exist on the scene. This is a free vanilla public server, and now that Season of Mastery is closing too, one of the big caveats of vanilla private servers not being around really for the past few years was because Blizzard had an official product. Well, I guess they have maybe some legacy classic server, but I don't think anybody plays it. I don't think it's active. I don't think it's in development, so they really aren't offering the vanilla product anymore. Many people understand, intellectual property laws, but if something doesn't exist anymore, it's really hard to make an argument, especially in an international court, that it should still be restricted. So legally, we don't have that much of a concern. Again, especially because we're not profiting from it. This is a free project which does not accept any donations. So not a whole lot of concern there, especially because of the place where we've chosen to host. They don't really. It's a country that won't really care too much, and Blizzard doesn't have legal jurisdiction there. And that's really just a fair compromise, I think, that we've seen in the past, where if it's a free public project hosted overseas, they're not going to really waste too much time on it. It's not worth their time, first off.
Yeah, I think that will help some people. I heard that they are thinking of playing on Everlook, but they are not sure because of Blizzard. And what I usually tell them is it's more about the journey and the memories you make, but I think that will help some people to decide.
Yeah, and something people always should remember is that at the end, the game does come to an end. The server comes to an end. Your character is... We don't go to TBC here. It's a private server, so unless you're planning on playing Nax forever, and we keep the server open indefinitely, which you won't. You're going to get bored at some point. It's about the journey, and it's about starting all over anew again. But that shouldn't ever deter people, because again, we're determined to go through the full life cycle. So if they're afraid that we're going to get some sort of legal notice, no, I wouldn't be concerned about that.
Will we get a faction balance meter on the website?
Yeah, I'd like to do some sort of faction polling, but the problem is it's often very inaccurate. And personally, I can tell you right now, from having been on the PTRs for the past 3 months, the factions are completely balanced. It's like 50-50 straight down the middle. And I don't think it's going to be as bad as it was in Classic, because simply not as many people are trying to prove themselves. This isn't Classic where there's 50 million people around the world signing in on different accounts, at all times, trying to outrank each other. This is one project contained in itself. It's not like you're comparing the scores that you get in a raid to another server. It's a lot less, I don't want to say less competitive, because the competitive nature and the aspects of the game are still there, and the players are most definitely just as competitive, but it's not nearly as much of an issue.
Yeah, I saw also, you can't take this really into account, but still we have an unofficial faction poll in the forums, and it's basically every time 50-50. So really close.
Yeah, it's a case of these days people just play what they want. Back on Classic, they might have gone the female human warrior just to top parses, but on Classic, they're gonna play the troll male and just dance goofy in town all day. And then they go and parse the same. They do the same in raids, and they perform just as well because it's the same players. They don't feel as pressured to. Which is, I think, a big reason why faction imbalance was so exaggerated on Classic, simply because people felt that they had to. They had to play X, Y, and Z, and if they didn't, they weren't actually playing the game. People don't feel so much like that anymore.
Yeah, that's also what I noticed, and I myself, I'm super casual. It's pretty much, I discovered all new, basically, for me, so I can encourage everyone to just go in and have some fun. There was still a question, are there any securities being put in place towards ensuring faction balance, like incentives or anything of that nature, like a login feature or something like that?
No. It's, again, our policy has just been, it's up to the players, and if they ruin the server, it's their fault. It's that simple. We're the developers, you know. We're not some godlike figures that can enforce things through miracle or divine circumstance. If people want to all roll Horde and sit in Ironforge killing people all day, and the server is 95% Horde, that's because the players chose that. So they have their own agency in the game world, and they have their own agency to make their own choices. And if that's what they choose and they ruin the server, that's on them. Can't really do anything about it. You know, and who knows? Maybe the server would be more fun like that with just a lot of people hunting the most hardcore people. Maybe that's, you know, a very enjoyable meta, and it would ascend to private server legend status, like many things have in the past, and they all do because it's purely player interaction. You know, we don't have influence on it, so we try and keep our hands off.
Yeah, that's also fair. But I am confident from what I've seen so far. I think people take this serious, and I saw some people talking about that, and they even said they would join the faction that would need more help. And it's up to us, guys. We will do it.
Yeah, and typically in vanilla, you have faction balance all the way up until about AQ, and then usually it's like Horde starts dropping out, and it's simply because Alliance at that point is just better in PvE, and PvP is kind of finished for the people who like spent all the time ranking and stuff by that point. And that's what I'm really hoping to, that the uncapped rested experience kind of solves, is the player dropout around BWL and AQ is because very often the players who want to do PvP on a priest or a warrior don't want to actually raid on that class, and they put all their time into ranking and gearing up, and then they fly through BWL in their crazy gear and slaughter everything, and then AQ rolls around and, well, I don't want to raid on a priest and keep healing for another 2 raids, and I can switch to Shadow, but blah, blah, blah. So it's like there's a lot of incentives to typical vanilla that would encourage people to all roll on one faction or min-max the game in a way that's not really healthy for the game or the community. Just having more people playing longer into the server is always a good thing. There's really no argument against that, and I think that will alleviate a lot of faction imbalance because people feel less restricted. You can go make your Tauren shaman and go pick herbs all day and kill people in the open world. You know, if that's what you want, go do that. You won't feel like you're wasting time because there's less time actually being wasted.
Sounds good to me. I love Tauren.
That's always my fallback. After I max out an account, I make a Tauren, druid, or a shaman, and I just level slow and enjoy the game. And I never, that's a big problem though, is I never, on any of those alts that I've made in that case, I've never hit 60. I always get to like 45 or 50, but just the grind is just too much a mob grind, really, and have to take time to sit there for 4 or 5 hours every level killing mobs instead of just doing the quest and enjoying the game. And if I think that the gameplay experience would be much better simply if I could just go through the pace of the game in the way that the game is intended, without having to constantly juggle alts and constantly refresh my rested experience on them. Like, I don't want to have to worry about that. I don't want to have to juggle things to enjoy the game. I want to enjoy the game.
Exactly, that sounds like a hassle, so it's pretty cool that you guys will tackle that. Since we talk about alt characters, how would that work? Can you do actually a Horde character on the same account if you went Alliance?
Yes. You can make characters on the same account. And that's simply because on private servers, there's no fee, there's no registration, there's no subscription. You can, you know, make unlimited accounts. There's really no point in restricting it to single faction on an account, and it's just inconvenient at that point. So yeah, you're allowed to do, you know, you can do 5 Horde and 5 Ally on one account.
I'm glad to hear that. You would have another account and like a bank alt, and you would send your stuff to that alt and auctioneer that.
Oh, okay. You mean like mailing? Being able to mail and send stuff between Horde and Alliance? We had considered that, but there is a system in place already in the game to do that, and that's the neutral auction house. Obviously, some people had concerns where, oh, if I put an expensive item to transfer over, some bot or somebody is going to snipe it, and then I'm going to lose my item or my money. So there's a restriction in place where if you're using the neutral auction house, there is a 5-minute window where your auctions do not appear for anyone else outside of your own account. So you have essentially 5 minutes to post the auction and then buy it on your other account. And the reason why we decided to keep this is not only because the game already deals with this, but this is also a gold sink. There's a very heavy fine for using a neutral auction house, and it eliminates a lot of gold from the game by the end.
That's good to know. What I meant was I got questions and people wanted to know if they could make another account. So you have 2 accounts and you could alt-tab and send the stuff back and forth.
Oh, okay, like a bank alt at the same time. Sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, there's restrictions to what is allowed in terms of using a bank account. Essentially, your both accounts must be of the same faction. They must be inside of the same city at the same time. It has to be a city with an auction house, so neutral cities or capital cities. Basically, you're only allowed to have 2 accounts at the same time if you're just sending mail and they're both standing next to each other. You're not allowed to be out in the open game world. You can't be multi-boxing. You can't mob tag with an alt account or heal yourself with a follower priest. Basically, we want to encourage behavior that's organic to the game and not organic to botting or cheating, really, what it is.
Yeah, I'm a bit nervous, so I, I stumble a little bit, so I try to loosen up a bit.
Oh no, people just ask every question because they want to know, and I've been asked many times about neutral auction house functions, stuff like that. So, but yeah, multi-boxing, you're only allowed to have a bank account. Like I said, within the same city, they have to be next to each other, and typically we say your bank account should be level 5 or lower, and that's so you can disenchant and have your speed boost and stuff like that. Yeah, obviously we don't want 2 people running around at the same time and it's just one person. We have ways to detect it. If you think using a second computer at the same time is going to work, no. Like, it's very, very obvious when you're controlling one at a time. It's very obvious.
That's good.
A lot of people say, well, it's my wife playing next to me. Well, why do you and your wife don't move at the same time? And if you do, it's super basic. Like, you have one hand on one keyboard, one hand on the other. It's not hard to see that you're not doing it right.
Yeah, that was also a big problem on Classic. Since we talked about a little bit about the PvP stuff, will the honor system be implemented at launch?
Yes, honor will be in place from launch, and Battlegrounds will be available earlier than typical, simply because people don't want to wait 3 months just to start doing Battlegrounds. A lot of people want to do them sooner than that. Same with Honor. People want to start ranking right from the get-go. They don't want to have to wait around. Honor is going to be in from the launch in 1.2. Battlegrounds are planned for the same time as Dire Maul, which is 1.3, about a month after. Battle Masters will not be added until after in 1.4, which means players who want to queue Battlegrounds in the first month will have to go to the Battleground portal locations. This creates a little bit more atmosphere of world PvP and a little bit more direct immersion in the game. And for PvP vendors, that's the thing too, because Alterac, AB, and AV are typically released. Alterac Valley and Warsong are released at the same time, but Arathi Basin comes later. The gear vendors would be in the game a little bit earlier. Some concern is simply over the Warsong Gulch Epic leggings. There's a pair of male leggings that is essentially best in slot until Bax Ramus, really. So I'm probably going to restrict those until 1.9 when they typically get released. Everything else, though, will be available. So people will have incentive to play other Battlegrounds besides Alterac Valley for Honor once that's released.
Oh, that's good. That's good. This makes a lot of people happy.
I might release the legs in 1.7 or 1.8, just to be aware.
Okay.
Because I do want them to be a good reward. And a big problem is it takes about 300 hours to hit Exalted in Warsong Gulch, and that's playing efficiently. And that's 50-50 win-loss average, and I think 15-minute time per match or 10-minute time per match in the calculation. So it's about 300 hours. 600 hours max if you lose every game, and like 200 for quick people if they're winning 75%. It's a long grind. It's a very, very long grind. Warsong Gulch Rep is probably one of the longest grinds in the game, in fact. So the rewards should be good. Most people, they get Warsong Exalted if they spam it by the time they hit about rank 12, which, yeah, it's like about over 2 months of playing right there. So like the reward should be good, and it should be something that people seek. It shouldn't be obviously best in slot from the beginning all the way through the game, but there are some items like that. So a lot of the complaints are a bit misplaced because stuff like Lionheart Helm is best in slot from the beginning all the way to the end. And there's a lot less grind in Lionheart Helm. You know, you go out and you can spend less than a day and get it, whereas you have to spend 2 months straight in Warsong Gulch to get this pair of legs here. Yeah, they'll be put off probably. Maybe I would say 1.8 is probably what I'm gonna aim for. I wanted to come out after BWL and before AQ. That's kind of right where their power level lies. You can replace them in AQ. So yeah, give people a little bit reward earlier.
About Alterac Valley, will we get the pre-nerf version?
Yes. Yes and no. You're going to have pre-nerf. You're not going to have old map, simply because the map is client side, so you can't have the original map. There is somebody in the VMangos community currently he's redoing Alterac Valley, so we should, by launch of Alterac Valley, have the correct sniffs from Classic all implemented. Previously on every private server, all the creatures and stuff were all hand spawned, including all the game objects, all the flags and stuff. So nothing was truly correct previously on private server for Alterac Valley. Everything was just guesswork entirely from old video footage and whatnot. Now we'll have the official Classic sniffs, so everything will be in its correct place. It should work correctly. All the flags are going to be in the exact position that they were in Classic, stuff like that. For old Alterac Valley pre-nerf, yes, you will have that as well. It does change over time. Eventually you have less landmines, less enemies. The enemies aren't as hard, but pre-nerf Alterac Valley, the archers hit tanks for friggin' 700 damage each. Clothies, they tear right through clothies. It's definitely going to be an experience for the first few months. And in terms of Alterac Valley Lotus, that Alterac Valley Lotus is actually a custom private server thing. It's never been a thing in vanilla, never been a thing in Classic. It was never a thing in old Alterac. That's Alterac Lotus is totally custom. But yeah, we're going to add it. Huge demand for it. People fucking loved it on Northdale. They'd race towards the center of the map and fight each other for one Black Lotus for 20 minutes. You know, it's a fun experience, and it gives people a little bit more incentive to queue and play a little bit more competitively than they normally would. So I have no problem with that.
Sounds good. I think that's also a little bit intertwined with the battleground thing. I was asked if seasonal events will be implemented like Christmas, and I think they mean also if this gets also put into Alterac Valley, like pumpkin for Halloween and something like that.
All season events, they exist obviously in the server. They're not added until appropriate patch though, so you might not have actually some seasonal events depending on when the server launches and when it ends. But yeah, every seasonal effect should be there. I can't verify all the minute details to make sure everything's correct, but I assume that they are. Everything is working fine. So,
is there going to be a pre-made queue system for Battlegrounds?
Yeah, we do plan on doing pre-made versus pre-made for Battlegrounds. Currently on the PTR, we've had it set to where essentially if you are in a group of 2 or more people, you will go up against other groups of 2 or more people. You get matched against another group, and then the spots get filled in with pug players. So if you're in a 2v2 and another 2v2 of the enemy faction queues up into a battleground, the system will attempt to place you 2 together, facing each other, and then it fills in the empty spots with people who are solo queued. This ensures that people are able to do their pre-mades of any size at the same queuing rates and the same pace, and it ensures that there's balance between them, where you're not getting 9-man pre-made versus 10 pugs on one side, and it's just a total stomp. Like, it's not enjoyable gameplay for half of the people in the battleground right there. So
that's good.
It's an attempt to keep the battlegrounds a bit more balanced and competitive.
Nice one. Will there be something done about bracket manipulation if that happens, like in Classic?
That's something for the players to deal with. And personally, I think bracket breaking and bracket manipulation, as somebody who's played private servers for quite some time, is total horse shit. Like, if you want the spot, I understand the idea behind setting up brackets just to do it efficiently for everyone, but it's a competitive PvP game. And I offered a solution for bracket breaking, and obviously, you know how it is. People don't want it because it doesn't fit within their framework of vanilla, so adding rank 15 would solve bracket breaking without it changing the system fundamentally. Just prevents people from sitting in rank 14 or sitting at rank 14 when they shouldn't. If they push past everybody in the bracket, they get shoved into rank 15 instead, so you don't lose any slots on rank 14. We have no plans for doing anything like that, though. We're not going to add that. That's just another player problem. They have to figure that out.
Will a dynamic respawn be enabled in the beginning, even for quest items like interactables?
Yeah, and for quest items, and that's the thing, game objects, they do have a way to set them as dynamic, but it's very difficult to balance it because the way that quests work. So right now we're doing a lot of work under the hood here to correctly put quest objects into their proper pooling templates, which, coupled with the fact that all quest objects respawn on a 10-second timer here instead of 2 to 5 minutes normally, will really help with the fresh experience. It'll help create a lot better flow in these starter zones without affecting quests where you have to just collect X amount of items. And again, that's the big concern is there's a quest that has you go retrieve something from a lockbox. Well, if you're in a party of 5, you have to all wait 5 times for that thing to spawn so you can collect it and then go complete the quest. Or if somebody's there ahead of you, you have to wait for them. That should be reduced, which is why we've reduced it to 10 seconds. We believe that's very fair compromise on the time. It does create, obviously, some bottleneck. That's how it should be, though. You know, there should be some sort of restraint on it. For quest objects where you have to go out and collect something, like you have to find 5 bundles of wood over an Elwyn. We don't want the object to repeatedly respawn on itself, so you just stand in one place and pick up the same thing over and over. So what we do is we take all of the possible spawn locations and we pool them together. And objects can only spawn in a limited quantity across all of those spots, and all of those spots get randomly rolled when a slot is available. So if you pick up a bundle of wood, it'll respawn within X amount of time, which is 10 seconds, but it randomly spawns at one of those available locations. This'll, I do a lot to essentially keep the game more vanilla with an actual vanilla-like system, but not break immersion when doing these quests.
Where to post bugs and in-game issues? Does the in-game ticket system work?
Yeah, if you have an issue in-game, you can file a ticket in-game. That's definitely a good option. If you have a bug that you discover, I would put it on the GitHub bug tracker. Yeah, put bugs on there. I review that once a week, and I try and go through all the issues there and hammer them out on the weekends. So
I will also put that in the description, and I will also have a pop-up on screen. Will we be able to progress and complete dungeon quests if we are in a raid group?
Yeah, you'll be able to do all quest objectives while in a raid. Obviously, the experience reductions still apply. So if you're on a quest where you have to kill 12 things, I wouldn't be in a raid, because if you don't need to be, you're just getting less experience. But when you have to, kill a mob to complete a quest objective, you can do so while in a raid here. If you have to pick up an item, you don't need to leave your dungeon group real quick and grab it and then rejoin and hope that the party leader's not AFK so you don't get kicked. Like, you don't have to go through any of that. You just do the quest. You can complete it within a raid completely. There's no restrictions on that. And especially too, during the fresh launch, a big concern is some quests are like escort quests, where you have to wait 10 minutes between each attempt. You have 40 people waiting. Well, obviously that's not getting done. So for now, what you can do is just group up in a raid, bring all 40 people, just put them in a raid, get the quest done, and free up the bottleneck in the zone, because there's going to be 1,000 people waiting in line behind you anyways.
Yeah, for sure. I got a question today. I think this has something to do with the recent dev update post you made. The question is, are all flight paths available from the start, like the one from Ratchet, as an example?
Yeah, the ones that got re-added were Ungaro, Ratchet, Camp Taraho. Let me pull up the list real quick. I got it right here.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, Ratchet, Ungaro, Searing Gorge for Horde and Ally, and Camp Taraho. So those 4 locations, those 5 flight masters at those 4 locations have been added from patch 1.2, so launch, all the way onwards. The only one that wasn't really added early was Silithus, and that's because there's nothing there until 1.9, and there's still a dead drop. And that's primarily because of the way that the client changes over the course of vanilla. You can't change the map, so we just don't even add that one.
Yeah, it goes back basically to the progressive thing. This is a bit of a longer question, multiple ones, but how about the items? Will we have progressive itemization? Will we get ugly tier sets? How about the Talisman of Binding Shard from MC?
Yeah, it's full progressive itemization. You will definitely have ugly tier sets for some classes. For some classes, they probably look better the old way. But you will have Talisman of Binding Shard. You will also have Talisman of Binding Fragment, which I'll diverge a little bit on that. The
Phew.
Talisman of Binding Shard was a legendary neck that dropped once in original vanilla. Dropped from, I believe, Gar, and only one player ever got it. It was 1.3, I believe, that they got it. And then in 1.4, the drop was removed from the loot table, and essentially it was replaced with the Bindings of the Windseeker. Well, it turns out that there was a second neck, because this was the original Bindings of the Windseeker. There was a second one on Gar that nobody ever got, and nobody ever knew about, really, until data mining from Classic revealed that there was a second legendary neck with one digit off in the ID. Did the exact same thing, looked the exact same, but just from thinking about it, it's very obvious what this was. This was the original Bindings of the Windseeker. That's why it's Talisman of Binding Shard, not the Binding Shard. Talisman of Binding Shard and Talisman of Binding Fragment. So basically 2 pieces of the Talisman of Binding that you connect and would create Thunder Fury. Obviously, the quest wasn't added at that point, so it didn't have that function, but that's likely what it would have, ascended to. The big thing about the neck, too, is that it wasn't, I don't believe it was tradable in the beginning, so it is a freely tradable legendary piece. You're meant to give 2 of them to one person so they can make the sword, obviously. So, yeah, those will be in-game. Those will be available at the same drop rate that they originally were. I believe it's 2%, same drop rate as the Bindings. And, whoever gets lucky within those first 2 patches and doing Molten Core and they get a legendary neck, well, you're probably going to be the only person to ever actually own those on private server or even a real server.
Oh, this is going to be big then.
Yeah, and the neck is pretty good. People underestimate it. They think, oh, it's kind of junk, but for a tank, that neck is insane. It's got so much fire resist, higher than anything else, so you're going to basically wear it all the way up until AQ.
There was also a question, I don't know much about this. Would this also mean in the early stages that tier 2 would also drop from Molten Core?
Yes. During first, I believe, 2 patches, 1.2 and 1.3, tier 2 pieces do drop from Molten Core bosses. It might only be 1.2, I can't remember the exact patch. But yes, they will drop from Molten Core bosses. In fact, you can't actually complete a full tier 1 set in the first patch, simply because the full set doesn't drop from Molten Core. It drops partially from Blackwing Lair, which not added in the game yet, obviously. Yeah, that got readjusted in 1.3 or 1.4. So we're going to have the same loot tables and the same drop chances here. So yeah, if you're really looking forward to getting your tier 2 3-piece set bonus, you could do it within the first month of launch, really, if you got really lucky.
There was also a question, will there be a way to choose and stick with previous stats if the item was earned before a certain point patch?
Yeah, a lot of people, that's the thing, a lot of people want the original tier sets and they want to use them. And having the original stats and the original item rolls for the sake of progression, it's nice, but again, it's one of those things where you're shooting yourself in the foot for nostalgia's sake. It's not good gear for most classes. For some classes, it's slightly better and looks better, but for most, it's not good gear. And the tier 2 is not good gear, and having them mixed in the drop tables isn't necessarily the best. But that's vanilla. That's just how vanilla was. So we do think about considering an option to let players retain their original tier 1 set, and it would have to be implemented in a way that doesn't allow you to use 2 sets at once. Basically, you would flip a switch and you're either using the old or the new, and all the items would be automatically converted depending on what your config setting was. That would take a lot of back end, and that's more frills really for the sake of just player enjoyment. But yeah, that's not high priority right now. It's something we've discussed, and if I find the time, I would do, but it's just low priority.
All right, fair enough. Is there going to be a database that we can check for Everlook specific decisions on gear quest item rewards?
Obviously, a lot of stuff isn't going to change because it's vanilla. So over the course of time, I don't think a database would really be necessary, but my plan is to just take all of my scripts and all of my commits and everything and just summarize them all up in a pamphlet. So people have an exact list of all the stuff and they can look through it and reference it. Some of the stuff, it's not data mined from Blizzard because there is no data to mine. Proc rates being a big example. Proc rates for the last 20 years have been simply guesswork. That's all they are. So to have proc rates from Northdale, you kind of have a point of reference for most of the information. In fact, if you just want to find the information, you just look at the White Hope databases and can compare. Some of the structures have changed and you need to have some technical know-how. So that's why I plan on putting out some sort of comprehensive pamphlet. It's going to have all the information that you need and you look through it and reference it at any time.
Oh, I would love to have that. Will the spells and talents also be progressive?
No. Talents and spells are client side. All that information is housed in the client, so talents changing is a hard no. You would have to change the client with custom patch or use an older client, whatever. But spells are also hard-coded in the client. Their visible information is like the spell visual, the tooltip, stuff like that. Whether or not the aura appears at a certain time, that's often handled by the client. So having progressive spells is almost impossible, but not for specific cases. Many specific cases, it's easily doable because the spell is almost entirely back end. If I wanted to, let's say, increase the damage on Herod's whirlwind spell or ability that he uses, that's very easy to adjust the damage values. I just go in the database and change the numbers. But for like if a spell changes effect vastly over time, and doesn't have the original spell data within the client housed as a separate spell ID that I can just reuse, it can't really be changed. So like I said, though, some things back end allow us to change stuff, which means I can do progressive stuff on spells. All attack normalization that happened in patch like 1.7 has been reverted here on all spells because it's very easy to do that. So, like warriors, rogues, hunters, they have no normalization on their abilities right now. And playtesting feels really good. They feel really smooth. Spell vulnerability exists here. You can go into negative resistance, which causes you to take more damage from spell damage. This was a vanilla mechanic that was scrapped in 1.9. And I'll tell you right now that this mechanic is the missing piece from vanilla that would have entirely fixed class balance, like almost entirely. Through testing in AQ, we saw that with negative spell resistance, in tier 2 gear, I should say, doing equivalent content, we tested with negative spell resistance that Warlock, Mage, Rogue, Hunter, and Warrior were all neck and neck in DPS on the meters. And negative spell resistance is like a massive equalizer for a lot of classes that aren't entirely physical. So yeah, it's like having that mechanic present, and a real mechanic from vanilla present here that's never been present anywhere else, not on Classic, not on other private servers. It's really a big deal because it creates a lot smoother gameplay for a lot more people. And every class has gotten as much love as they possibly can to make them as pristine state from any point in vanilla. So I try and do the progressive stuff as much as I can, but there's obviously some hard limits to it.
That is really amazing. Especially we have sometimes in the Discord people coming in and they say, "Oh, why would you play this instead of Classic?" And well, pretty big thing, especially almost every time they say it's all the same class are the warrior, rogue, mage. Those are just the go-to classes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, having original shadow damage on Lupos as a hunter with no normalization on your aim shot or your multi-shot, and negative spell resistance amplifying Lupos's damage by 30%.
Whoa.
Like warlocks, hunters, and mages are going to top the meters all the way up until AQ. Absolutely guaranteed. A pre-bis warlock can crit about 4k realistically with like Shadow Bolt in a rated environment with negative vulnerability, and it's a very low roll chance to hit that high because the way that it works is pretty inverse to spell resistance. So having negative 300, you're going to hit for 75% damage extra more often. But yeah, with curses, like you're still seeing about 20% DPS increase, and then on top of that too, Warlock has an old mechanic that was implemented again. This was patched out in, I think, 1.8, where you can demonic sacrifice your pet. And if somebody resurrects it very quickly, you have like 11 seconds to get this resurrect off. So 1 second window. You can res the pet, though, without losing the demonic sacrifice buff. And this was a thing all the way up until, I think, 1.8 in vanilla. And it's basically like, what, extra 10% damage? It's like an extra 15% damage for warlocks on top of the 20% they're getting from negative spell resistance being in game. So yeah, there's a lot that changes with the correct vanilla progression, where you never saw it in 1.12 servers like Classic that don't have any of this stuff, or even private servers that just have never implemented, because it's typically viewed as being something that's client side, but it exists in the 1.12 client and it functions the same, so there's no point not to have it.
Oh, that sounds really amazing. Since we are talking about that, I had a question. Casting feels a bit sluggish sometimes compared to Classic. Is that intended, and can it be tweaked server side? There's some kind of a delay they have to spam if you spam basically your Force Bolt or Shadow Bolt.
That's nothing to do with server, unfortunately, and I have heard people complaining about this. That's simply client side. That's with the 1.12 client. Basically, the way that it works is, in Classic, the client sends the attempt to cast the spell, and then the server responds with the okay. But the client still handles the casting. In 1.12, the client has to wait for the okay from the server before it can begin casting the next spell. Which that's a very basic explanation of it. But essentially, you have to wait your latency's time after the spell ends for the next one to begin. And this is very noticeable on spells that take 1.5 seconds or a global cooldown to cast. You can't cast it immediately after. You have to wait your latency, which for me is like 100 milliseconds. I have to wait additionally on top of every spell. This is something that's with the 1.12 client. A 1.14 client doesn't experience this, and there is workarounds. There is NAM power, which is made by the same guy who makes the Warden system. It's basically a client edit that allows your client to give the okay to cast without receiving a response from the server first, which doesn't allow you to just cast spells without the server giving the okay. It's all done server side, but you don't have to wait for that response to start client side, which saves a lot of time. If you really want to smooth out the gameplay experience, and especially if you want to be efficient in raids and you're playing on an international server here, where on Classic you had 20 ping, on here you have 120. NAM power is definitely something to look into. Again, be aware, we don't advocate any type of memory edits, which this technically would be. Our anti-cheat system, if it bans you, we won't unban you, and you use it at your own risk. But I've never known personally any case of anybody being banned from using NAM power. If you search the Discord, you can definitely find it. Yeah, that's really the only solution.
Would that be also a 24-hour ban, or would that be a strictly permanently banned in case it would trigger?
I don't suspect it would ever trigger, simply because it's made by the same guy who basically makes the anti-cheat, so it's probably never going to trigger. But if it did, it would be an automatic 24-hour ban, and we would review it to find out what you're doing. If we saw, he got banned automatically for using NAM power, it would be a 24-hour ban. But again, you're modifying your client, and if our anti-cheat flags it as a modified client and auto bans you, and we don't have a way to tell, we're just going to assume that you're using fly hacks or something and not unban you. As with everything, it's with your own risk. But again, I've never known anybody to get banned for using NAM power, made by NAM Reeb, and you find it in the Discord. But again, we don't advocate, we don't advise, and I won't advertise the use of it. So.
Yeah, fair enough. There was a question, are there any plans of recreating the Blood of Hakkar pandemic in patch 1.7?
Oh yeah, I've already looked into it. That's gonna be a thing.
Oh, nice. Oh god, this is going to be chaotic.
I'm gonna have to script something specific for it. The original spell data can be used, but obviously there's gonna be a ton of potential for abuse, so I want it to be as vanilla-like as it had happened, but at the same time, it needs to be within the boundaries of not breaking the game.
Yeah, that was wild. But that's cool. That's really cool. That also makes a lot of people happy, so I'm glad. Pretty basic question. Will we be able to play with world buffs?
Oh yeah, we don't want to restrict world buff usage from raids because it's a very enjoyable part of the game for a lot of people. You know, they look forward to it. And if you don't want to use world buffs, then don't use them. Nobody can make you, and if they tell you you can't come raid, we'll find a different guild. Like, it's that simple. However, we do understand that the world buff power spike that you get trivializes a lot of content when you're absolute min-maxing on it. And frankly, that's something that a lot of people, they neglect to say because I think it's kind of a shameful aspect to it. A lot of the people who think that they're very good at the game are just putting in a lot of effort to get as powerful as possible before actually doing the content. And these are the same people on the PTR who I see kissing the floor 7 or 8 times in a single boss fight. Like, it's world buffs are a crutch indeed, but they're part of the game where you put in the effort before the raid in preparation and you are rewarded with an easier clear and a better time. And that's how it should be. It really is. You know, you should be coming prepared. It's not about how quickly you can push buttons. It's about how much time did you take to prepare before showing up to this boss fight. That's a big aspect of the game. The way that we're going to do it is world buffs will not be allowed to be used in raids until the raid has been fully cleared by the first guild on the server. And that ensures that the race to the first isn't determined by who got griefed on their way to the portal. Any other metric that might throw off the playing field outside of pure skill and preparation in the months beforehand gearing up. That keeps the integrity of the server first completion a lot more intact. Again, a big issue is if you have 5 guilds competing for server first and one guild doesn't like the other, they go and dispel the guild's world buffs before they show up to the portal. Boom, like they've already eliminated one guild from the race. So it creates bad atmosphere for actual competition. But after a guild clears the raid, full completion, after that lockout, the next lockout, world buffs will be re-allowed for everybody. And only world buffs, obviously, up until that point, so that's progressive.
Yeah, sure. There's also the question, will there be a cooldown on the World Buffs NPCs and events?
No, there's no planned cooldown. The only purpose of the cooldown is to grief. There's no point to it. It's the same system as Northdale. You drop your head, you get your buff, you go. And you have a very small minority of people who will cry very, very, very loudly saying, well, this ruins the game for me because all I do all day is just grief the world buff vendor, and that's my game. Sorry, dude, like, fucking, go find some other way to ruin somebody else's game. Like, that's that simple.
Yeah, I heard a lot of that, yeah.
I'm not interested in hotfixing every way to fucking ruin somebody's game, but this is how it was on Northdale, and this is how it's going to be here.
I will squeeze this in between. Is there a timeline for the server, and if not, when will it be released?
For the entire server's progression, we're going to have a full timeline posted before launch with all the dates that we have planned. Of course, subject to change. You never know when stuff needs to be pushed or pulled.
Cool.
But we expect to go on for approximately 2 years, at least 1.5 to 2. It really depends on how quickly players progress through the content, And a lot of people want to enjoy their time after Nax and get their gear and enjoy the server, and we hope to see a lot of that. We hope to see quite a number of people doing that.
How many debuff slots will there be on launch?
8 debuff slots on launch, 16 at ZG.
Will the mob values be tuned like WoW Classic?
Mob values are tuned to be either like Classic or like Northdale, whichever is harder. And we've taken great time to compare both data sets for what players enjoy and then what they got in Classic. And we've taken time to analyze everything in the game to ensure that the balance is perfect, the tuning is great. People have playtested the Northdale numbers for half a decade, so they know what's in store. And people can still understand that Classic corrected a lot of things. Some things were harder on Classic than Northdale. Some mobs had no armor on Northdale. So whatever is harder, whatever is the higher value is used, and we hand check everything to make sure that there's no anomalies.
Will all mobs be kiteable infinitely?
Yeah, as long as you just keep tagging the mobs, you can kite them infinitely.
Will various methods of farming resources using instances be allowed, like DM tribute runs, BRD pickpocketing?
Yeah, of course. Nothing has been changed in that regard. Some of the mobs, obviously their tuning has gotten more difficult. And that's been a concern for some players, so I've taken a look at some of the common gold farms, and I've adjusted them to be a little bit more difficult than Classic. Obviously, it's going to be Lights Hope numbers, Northdale numbers, but yeah, it's everything's doable. Obviously, mob pathing in some places does change between Classic and original vanilla because the clients are different, and the way that the maps are generated is handled differently. So you're not going to see some like crazy ZF reset spot farms working. There's obviously AoE farms you can do from vanilla that you couldn't do on Classic. You can still do the ZG Tiger farms and the Croc farms just fine. There's no issues there. As I say, gold farms generally unchanged. Dire Maul Lasher farm is one big one that people ask, and that's simply because it was hyper inflated on private servers and then fixed by Classic because we didn't have the correct drop tables for any of these mobs, so they're pumping out gold. That's not going to be a thing. Obviously, the gold is still good. It's like 40 gold an hour doing Lasher farms or something as a paladin. But yeah, it's not going to be 150 like it was on private servers.
This would also mean the Zul'Farrak graveyard farm would also be doable.
You'd have to test that. I didn't play Classic. I didn't do that on Classic, so I couldn't tell you really how it went. But a lot of people say no, it was only 2 Classic that could be done because the reset spot doesn't work on the older client, which is probably the case. And either way, you're not getting the same XP rates as you did in Classic because Classic had faulty XP rates. They were giving too much experience in essentially dungeon and raid groups. So yeah, you're not going to get like insane ZF 200k an hour XP farms. Like that's not vanilla.
This is a longer question. Will we be able to take blacksmithing and get Glimmering Mithril Insignia, then drop blacksmithing and still be able to equip it?
It has a blacksmithing requirement to equip the item. I can't remember if you can keep it equipped and then drop blacksmithing, and if you never unequip it, it might stay. That's something you'd have to just go test out on the PTR. I couldn't answer that right now off the top of my head. One thing to note is I did say the other day that Glimmering Mithril Insignia would be changed to its pre-1.9 state, but I did discover some issues that will prevent that from happening, so it's just going to be the same effect as always.
In return, this would also mean if you would do this with Gnomish engineering, that would also mean you have a Gnomish engineering requirement on that item?
No, the Gnomish, that's the thing, the blacksmithing items require blacksmithing, so Glimmering Mithril Insignia requires 225 to equip the item. If you drop the profession after having it equipped, I don't think it unequips, and you can still use it. As long as you don't unequip it yourself, it won't unequip. That's to my knowledge of how that works, but Gnomish engineering doesn't have any hard requirements to actually equip and use the items that are locked to Gnomish, which is why you craft all the Gnomish items and switch to Goblin. The only item I think that has it is the Transporter and the World Enlarger, which are cosmetic and tertiary. So you get all the Gnomish gadgets, and then as long as you have engineering, you can still use them. You just don't need to have Gnomish.
Alright, cool.
And one thing to note, we're working right now on, I believe it should be corrected, the Soothsaying for Dummies typically doesn't work in vanilla until 1.10. Up until that point, it's extremely difficult to change professions. It's like impossible. The Soothsaying for Dummies book resets your specialty, so you can relearn professions easier. That's going to be added from 1.2 onwards, just convenience sake.
Oh, nice. Are boosting services allowed?
No, you're not allowed to advertise boosting services. Boosting is not permitted here. If you're leveling your friends in stockades and they're your guildmates and your buddies, like that's whatever, but you can't be selling boosting services in public channels. Boosting and GDKP are the two things that we don't want to see from Classic here, and it totally diminishes the entire point of the game. It ruins the game in too many aspects.
This is a bit of a joke question. Are the rumors true that there is a level 17 Hunter NPC in Ashenvale?
You're gonna have to find out yourself. Some legends say that he's still there, dancing over the corpse of his fallen enemy.
Then there is a question, what's the difference between Everlook and Classic? I mean, if you still want to add some points there, you can.
The main difference is that this is a project where people actually care, and they're passionate, and they work really, really, really hard to make it happen. And they do everything to keep the spirit of the game alive in the most original way as possible. And we are able to service the community and the game itself much better than a multi-billion-dollar corporation, which really speaks for itself. When you get stuck somewhere, and a GM is there within quite literally 7 seconds to help you out. Or you have a problem and you file a ticket and the ticket is already closed and they're answering you within literally 10 seconds. Or you DM me on Discord and I'll log in the game at any point in the day and come take a look at what the problem is. And if it's a bug, it gets fixed within the day or whenever the next update happens, which is usually every other day. It's the spirit of the game being kept alive by people who are able to put more soul into the game than any other corporation could. What more could a player really want?
Are there any other smallish gimmicks or quality of life features you want to mention?
Yeah, I've actually taken the time to add a few back-end quality of life things that really weren't ever present. They improve the game just in general. Nothing that will fundamentally change gameplay and nothing that will change the economy or anything, but just stuff that people have been asking for years. One of the big ones is I removed the portals from inside the Battlegrounds, so you can't get griefed by somebody sending you out a portal. And a lot of the higher end rankers wanted this, and a lot of the casuals wanted this too. The top end rankers want it because you can infinitely stall Warsong Gulch. You can sit on top of the Horde or Alliance portal if you're the right class, and your team can just cover you, and you can't ever get the flag back. Like, it just ruins the game. You have to leave the battleground and wait 15 minutes to actually start getting honor and rank again. So portals have been removed. I haven't touched any of the common jump spots, but I have blocked out of map areas in Warsong. You can't get on top of the Horde portal or the Alliance portal. You can't get up on top of the Horde base anymore. You can't blink through the walls as a mage to sit behind a wall that nobody can reach you on with the flag. All the common jumps, the fence jumps and all the skips, all that's still present in the game. Tons of people play Warsong on the PTR and they're all having a lot of fun. They really like the changes because it stops people from griefing the battleground. Yeah, so that's for Battlegrounds, but we're still redoing AV, so that's in the works. It's in-game right now, but it's in the old state. Still working on the updates. Another quality of life feature that I just added recently is the ability to reset dungeons while soloing from inside without having to invite people from another group to do it. And in fact, it's even more convenient because you don't even really, it's the same function and it only works while you're soloing. It doesn't work while you're in a party. So the party system still works the same way because there wasn't much of an issue there. When you're in a dungeon, just run the same macro, the script reset instances macro, and it'll notify you that the dungeon's been reset and tell you to exit. Just log out and you'll be sent right back to the front door. So no hassle, don't have to invite people, don't have to bother your guildies at 4 a.m. Quality of life stuff like that people do like.
Yeah, I tested that. This is really a nice one.
Yeah, like I said, I'll have a full packet of every little thing, every little nuance, all featured so people can kind of see what the deal is. If you've ever played Classic, you've ever played Vanilla, you know what you're getting. You know what you're expecting. The game is the same. People playing on the PTR they'll say, yeah, this feels just like Classic, feels just like Vanilla. Feels better tuning, more smooth, less lag. You can have 500 people PvPing in one zone with 0 lag. The game is just better. It's just simply better.
Yeah, really glad we could talk. Was really nice. Sorry, I'm a bit robotic.
No, not at all, man. It was a great interview. I'm glad I had the opportunity to sit down and talk with you again, and yeah, I'm glad that we could get all this down on recording so players can reference all this.
Oh yeah, I hope it helps. But I'm confident this will be great. I really feel it, especially like I don't want that it comes like a slimy across, but I really appreciate what you are doing. I also appreciate, of course, the others. I don't know the others that much, but nonetheless, I'm really glad this is happening.
Yeah, it's exciting, and players are really hyped for it, and hey, we're gonna have fun. That's what it's going to be about. We're going to have a good time for the next 2 years playing this. So I'm excited. I probably won't have a whole lot of time to play on the server myself, but my goal is to deck out a level 10 Paladin Twink and then just sit at the crossroads. Pummel people all day.
That's good. We need Alliance players who do this, especially with the Horde planning, to conquer Redridge and Westfall.
Oh, I'm gonna terrorize everybody in the Barrens. It's not even gonna be funny. I'm just gonna sit there with my fiery enchant and speedy boots and friggin' 500 health and just kick the shit out of people all day.
Damn.
Hey, it was good talking though. Yeah, I'm gonna go get something to eat and get back to work here. I'll be around the server and on Discord if you want to get a hold of me for any questions. Yeah, definitely much appreciated, man. I love your videos and the content. I'm definitely glad to sit down and talk.
Thank you, man.
You have a good one.
Take care. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a nice day, guys. Stay safe out there. Vincent out. Bye bye.